Please welcome to the stage Andrew Nurnberg. While researching a doctorate in Anglo-Russian diplomatic history, Andrew took a job working one day a week at a small literary agency to make ends meet. He soon fell in love with the world of publishing. Putting the doctorate on hold, he set up Andrew Nurnberg Associates in 1977, specializing in the international representation of authors. Tonight, he will present the Grand Master Award. Andrew.
Добрый вечер. Как-то непонятно, почему по-американски. Я не знаю, ну просто ужасно. Ой, нет, сюда. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. This is a real pleasure and privilege to be here. You think you've got problems at home. Just think what it's like for me to be away for 4 days away from the B word in London. So I'm supposed to say a few words about Martin Cruz Smith, whom most of you probably know as Bill Smith. We all know him as Bill. I don't know where the rest came from, but anyway. We're honoring tonight a writer of not just superb, nail-biting suspense, but one whose language is as pithy as it's beautiful, as literary as it is witty, as dark as it is light. Just hearing those few words now, the beginning of Gorky Park, I just ask myself, and apologies to some people in the room, please, how many mystery writers are there who write prose which you remember without ever having to go back and look up again? That is Smith for you. And this evening, I believe that Simon & Schuster, our hosts here, have a little dépliant, so you're going to be able to read the first few paragraphs of the new book. Is that right, John? John Karp gave us a wonderful champagne salutation yesterday morning in the offices of Simon & Schuster, and he gave a lovely little speech and rolled off a whole host of names under which Bill Smith had written long before I ever knew him. I've read one of those names, and the others I've never read. And Bill has, I've told him once or twice, what about those other books? Oh, you don't want to look at those. You don't want to look at those. So I was very fortunate because I just fell into place, as it were, still wearing short trousers at the time, when Gorky Park came along. Now, Gorky Park was represented by a wonderful agent, almost as curmudgeonly as Arkady Renko, by the name of Knox Berger. Some of you will know who Knox was. He was fairly eccentric. He could be quite irascible. He had an address which comes out of Harry Potter, 29.5 Washington Square West. I was always dying to go there, but it was many years later that I went there for the first time. And Knox delivered this to me at the time because we were looking after his very few authors internationally. I should say a couple of words about Knox, not least because he had been an editor at Simon & Schuster before he turned agent, and he was responsible for bringing in a book that his immediate boss, Mr. Simon of the eponymous publishing house, said, rubbish, you don't want to do this. But happily, there was an editor-in-chief by the name of Robert Gottlieb, before he went on to Knopf and the New Yorker, who said, wait a moment, we should publish this. I support Knox. It was a book called Catch 18. They changed the name, I think, because Leon Uris had already done Myla 18 not long before. But that was Knox. But then, at one stage, he decided he was going to get out of being an editor, and he wanted to be an agent. And when I attended a memorial following his death some little while ago, a few years ago, a friend of his said, I thought you might like to have a look at this letter, which we got when our daughter was about to get married. And I just want to read you 2 very short paragraphs, because it really sums up the kind of person whom I met and through whom, I got to know Bill. He was invited to the wedding, which he couldn't make, he said. But he said, for a wedding present, I'm going to find her a job, which beats a plated fish slicer any day, doesn't it? I hope you give us a call sometime when you're in town. Our little enterprise goes very well. No more Mr. Nice Guy. We now stick it into them, cut a major artery, draw off a bucket of blood, and run to the bank. The only fucking comeback is I have to give 90% of it to the authors. So, Gorky Park, as a manuscript, is delivered. This must have been 1980, I think, and just in time to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair. And in those days, publishers would just read books overnight, or they'd buy things blind. And I took with me, on her first trip, a woman who's now the managing director of our company, Sarah Nundy, with me, and I bump into this larger-than-life Brazilian publisher, Alfredo Machado. I said, Alfredo, I have just the right book for you here. And I described Gorky Park. He says, how much do you want? I told him what we wanted. He said, okay, done. And we were walking towards one another, and he goes off that way. Sarah and I go that way, and suddenly I hear this voice from behind me. Andrew, he calls. He says, don't forget to send me the manuscript. One of the great joys of working with Bill is that I've had the pleasure of going on a number of trips with him. We went to Berlin to do a bit of research for Red Square. Bill forced me to go into a sauna where he said a lot of heavy Russian mafia would be, and he would like me to overhear their conversations and report to him. So we go into this sauna, and there are these vast men. I mean, it's just fat pouring off them. And I can't hear them where Bill and I are sitting over here. And so I have to sort of slide up towards them and kind of cock an ear and kind of scratch a bit, and then came back. And that turned out to be my first job. And there were other jobs like this. We went to Cuba together for Havana Bay. We went to Kaliningrad, formerly Königsberg, of course, part of the carve-up at the end of the Second World War. Stalin took Königsberg, smashed to smithereens, of course, made it Kaliningrad, and it was an enclave until the collapse of the Soviet Union, and suddenly it became an exclave because the countries bordering it were suddenly part of the EU and no longer Russia. So they were there, stuck in there, a hub of crime, ships rotting in the harbour. We had to go off to the amber mines, which had all gone the way of all flesh. Private man now owned it, used to be state-owned. If you want amber, you can't get it anymore, etc. Then we went to a town north of Moscow called Tver, where Bill wanted to meet some people who had as a hobby digging up remains, artifacts, bones, medals from the Second World War, be they Germans, be they Red Army soldiers, and all that was pretty fine. Could I just have a glass of water, please? Do you mind, Sean? This is clearly a sign I should stop talking. I'm very sorry about this. And so we go there, and this was for Stalin's ghost. And as we're about to leave, Bill says, there's that place we passed. I think we should go in there. I want to go and have a look at this place. I remembered, as we got back in our car with our lovely young driver, a Russian man called Sasha, that it was a pole dancing dive. Now, I should just say that when we get there, Emily, Bill's wife, was there. Our interpreter, Luba, who was at that stage 8 months pregnant, was there. And we go into the entrance and we say, could we... I explained in Russian, I said, this is an author here. He'd like to just have a look inside. Oh, I'm so sorry, we're not performing at the moment. I said, no, that's fine. He just wants to get a sense of the size of the place and how this works and how it looks. It'll go into a novel. And they said, oh, of course, come in. Well, of course, obviously, they then felt obliged to bring on the talent. I had quite sneakily, we were on these benches, which were in a kind of half oval, half circle, and I put Luba, 8 months pregnant, right in the middle, and Emily next to her, me next, and I put Bill on the very end. Of course, needless to say, one of these ladies, having done all her swirls, decided then to come and sit on Bill's knee, which had not been the plan when we set off in the morning. Anyway, these were the Russian novels. But meanwhile, of course, as you've seen, he has written some magical other novels, the inspiration for which will have come from the most unusual places. Happily this evening, Bill and Em's children are here, and if I'm not mistaken, and Bill will correct me if I'm wrong, he went with Emily and the two girls one day shopping in San Francisco, and they went to Laura Ashley. And while the ladies were trying on clothes, he started reading a magazine about the background of Laura Ashley. This led him to a coal mining town of Wigan in North England, which inspired, of course, Rose, an absolutely magnificent novel. That any man can so consistently produce such brilliant books is, I think, incredible. That this man has done this for the last 20 years, beating aside Parkinson's, is totally astonishing. So, ladies and gentlemen, for this very unique writer, winner of the Hammett Awards, Golden Dagger Awards, I would like you please to raise your glass. Your peer and Grandmaster, Bill Smith.
Thank you. Is my mic on now? Oh, God, this is the scary part. But I want to simply, I can remind myself, I used to come to the Edgar Awards 30 years ago with Knox Berger. And I would sit there and watch them pass out the Edgars to Erwalu, to any variety of the greatest mystery writers in the world. And I was burning with envy. Wouldn't any outrageously ambitious, semi-talented writer feel the same? Because I'd come back 2 or 3 times in my time with Knox, and he was responsible for practically using a writing crop, whipping me on to more outrageous ambition. But I want to say that thank you. The only words I can possibly tell you that I say after this outrageous help from my dear friend Andrew is thank you. This has been the greatest school, greatest fun, greatest time of romance, and sometimes you feel, as I used to feel, the sky had opened up, and all I had was stars, and that was plenty for me. Was plenty, is plenty. Thank you very much.